Hi, welcome back to SQL in the City stream. Hopefully you enjoyed Kendra's opening, and now it's my turn to talk a little bit about DevOps, but DevOps from the culture perspective. And so the title of this talk is how do we build some team collaboration, how do we get people together, and then really how do we get there from here in terms of culture change. So the agenda for me is kind of looking at why the cultural part is hard, some of the ideas that are there. We'll talk about different ways we can think about shifting our culture and how to move forward, and then a little bit about how technology helps us. So let's jump in. I'm Steve Jones, and I work for Redgate Software as an evangelist, but I've been, through most of my career, spending time working in technology as a database person. So with SQL Server for 28 years now as both a DBA and a developer. So I've been on the development side and the operations side, and I've gone back and forth a few times. And then I've been a manager as well. So I've had to work with teams of people and coordinate either development teams or operations teams or both sometimes along the way. And so I've done this in big and small companies in a variety of different industries, and I've had it go well and not so well. And it doesn't seem that the size of the company or the industry or anything matters. It's more about building a team. So DevOps really crosses across all these teams, and so I've had some experience in seeing what works and what doesn't work. Now, I've been a writer and speaker for most of my career as well, and I founded SQL Server Central, almost 20 years ago now, which is kind of amazing. And so I'm still the editor-in-chief, and I'm proud at SQL Server Central that our goal is really to help you get better at your job, and Redgate supports that. Redgate, as much as we would like you to buy our tools and buy our software, we also just support the community, and we try to share information as much as possible so that whether or not you're a customer, you can build better software and be a better database professional every day. And then Microsoft recognized me as a data platform MVP, which I'm honored that. My contact information is at the bottom. It'll be at the end as well. So with that, let's get started. So this section I call the hard part of DevOps is because there are things I think that are hard and are easy with DevOps. And really the technology part is easy, and that's what I've noted here. We have this push right now into DevOps. I'm talking about it, Kendra does, Grant, various other companies are constantly talking about DevOps. And so I think we have this pressure to move to be better software developers, better database software developers across time. You know, lots of our management, lots of our friends, our colleagues, our coworkers learn and hear about DevOps. And so there's this push for us to be better engineers in some way. And I think most of us would like to be like somebody at Facebook or Netflix or Spotify or any of these high profile companies that release software constantly. We may not want to work at Netflix or Spotify or any of these companies, but their engineering solutions and the way that they get things done is kind of amazing. And so many people I know in this industry kind of aspire to be somebody that's talked about in the same way that the Netflix Chaos Monkey or the AWS deployment schedule or something else happens at their company. And we do a lot of that at Redgate as well, and I'm quite proud of that. But more importantly, all of us want to build useful software. We want our systems to be used and appreciated by others. So we want to get changes out there. We want to react to customer feedback. We want to get things done that are valuable and that people will use. And so all those things are kind of these tenets in this framework or these principles of DevOps. And so we are always pushing forward. And we have things, they said, that are easy and hard, right? So the cultural piece is hard, but the technology is really easy. So adding things like automation to introduce continuous integration or continuous delivery or continuous deployment, to learn to take our infrastructure and put it in code so that we can easily replicate it or deploy it, and we don't have to take special care of one machine, that we can rebuild that machine and replace it at any point in time. And string these together in a pipeline, those things are very easy. Grant or Kendra or Kathy or myself could all come to your office, and in days we could really implement these things in your database. But what's really hard are the cultural things. And it's because the way that most of our organizations are structured and the way that we've done development across teams really is a challenge to increasing collaboration. Now, I've listed a few things here on the screen. Certainly, we have lots of organizational silos in most companies or in most organizations. So whether it's government or nonprofit or commercial or anything else, we often find we have the traditional developer versus operations kind of tension where developers do their job and they kind of give code to operations, and then it's their responsibility, and operations doesn't know anything about what's happening, doesn't feed back to development. We have this tension there. We may have organizational priorities that are problems. So people may be working on project A and think it's more important than project B or vice versa. And so we don't really align our goals very well, and that decreases our collaboration. It decreases the ability to move rapidly and quickly and with repeatable, reliable processes. Or we may have the sales versus infrastructure, sales versus development challenge that I've certainly had in my career, where you have salespeople promising customers certain features or certain deadlines, and then it's up to infrastructure to make sure performance is there, or developers to get those features done, or anything else. And all these silos cause us friction and tension. They certainly make change management difficult, which Kendra talked about. And DevOps seeks to kind of break these down, but it's a very difficult thing to do. Maybe more importantly, we're all treated as individuals. And so we are hired alone. We tend to be fired alone, even if we're part of some layoff. And then we are evaluated and we're rewarded on an individual basis. So I may have goals that give me a bigger bonus or give me a better review, different than somebody else, which tends to inhibit some type of collaboration. You know, if Grant gets a bonus if something is finished and it doesn't matter to me whether that happens, then I have this disincentive to help him out or to be part of a bigger team. And so trying to align this is something that is an organizational change that's difficult to make, but it certainly can be done. You know, I'm proud to hear at Redgate that we all get the same bonus, you know, whether we're in sales or development or evangelism or anywhere else. So we have this incentive to work together as a team to make sure things happen. And one of the last impediments, I think, changing companies is that we have these competing priorities about whether we do things now or we do things for the future. So do we add new features, or do we refactor existing code that maybe could make the system run smoother with less resources or something else? Do we invest in something today, or do we consider the future and invest for tomorrow? These are very difficult priorities to balance. I'm not saying it's easy, but often we have a tension that one group worries about today and they're just focused on what's happening now, and one group thinks about the future, and it's very difficult to decide how do we do work in each area. So what we really want to do is we want to change cultures to better align everybody's goals and everybody's incentives so that we function as a smooth organization, not a bunch of different silos or a bunch of different individuals. To do that, we really have to create this team across the entire organization. And it's a difficult thing to do for sure, but as an example, I want to look at a couple of different areas and how we could kind of put that together. So many of us are data professionals, we're in the operations space, we're DBAs, and so we have all these concerns about our environment, things that we have to worry about. So we often inherit systems, or we get code sent to us and we worry about poor database modeling and poor database design, and that is an impediment to us. So we're always concerned that are we doing the proper design, and if not, we don't want to move forward. Or we have technical debt that has come along with the way things are structured. We've been handed an application, or we install a third-party software like Microsoft Dynamics, and so we worry about this technical debt that we can't change or we can't alter because we're just hamstrung. And it may be our internal systems that we're dealing with. And we certainly deal with the fact that the database is often a central point. So that creates dependency issues. If I have an application in a database, I'm often going to have reports, or I'll have ETL, or have some other process that inhibits change, or it creates dependencies that resist change. And that's kind of something that inhibits the ability to move quicker as we want to do in a DevOps area. And then lastly, we worry about the customer experience from the performance standpoint. Is it available? Does it work well? Does it use too many resources? Is it costing too much money? These are all things that DBAs are concerned about. And often other groups don't worry about some of these things. They just want to deploy their system, they want to deploy their application. It's up to us to figure things out. And all these concerns often leave DBAs to just say no, right? We try to prevent change from happening because we know it creates instability, or it creates poor performance. It's a poor experience for somebody. So we're often just resisting things happening. Our goals aren't aligned with part of the team, and we're not working with developers or management or anybody else. Now, developers and managers often have similar concerns, that they want to get features into the hand of customers. Developers want to be proud of their work, they want to showcase it, they want to get it out there, and so they're pushing forward. Certainly management, sales, other parts of the organization want to get these features out there as well, and so they're trying to move faster, often ignoring the concerns of the DBAs. And they want to work autonomously. Management often has their own goals, and they may or may not share those with you, but they're pushing things forward in one way. Development certainly wants to work autonomously. They want to build their systems, build their application code or their front-end code or middle tier, whatever it is, without worrying about the database concerns. They want the data store to just work. And so they have this ability to work autonomously, not as part of the team, which is something that we seek to change in culture. And of course, they want patches and bugs and security issues fixed quickly, right? They want things deployed when they want them deployed. And then often they want to work on interesting problems. They want to work at things that add value, that are creative, that are the hot items today, and they're not worried about the dependencies or the legacy items or the technical debt. Now, it's not every developer, everybody in management, but this is kind of that general case where we have two different areas of focus, two different items that we're concerned about or trying to advocate, and it creates this tension. So we have to, in some sense, build a team that works better together. And that's one of the challenges here as we're evolving culture, is to try to create a team across silos, across individuals, and across parts of our organization. Now, Kendra actually sent me this great link from DevOps Topologies. You can go look at it. And it talks about the different ways that we can evolve our teams to help put together groups with these different incentives or these different goals. And certainly the type of team structure you have depends on your environment and what your organization is like, what your applications, different things that you could look at, because it's not easy to get there from here. And we can't just switch our teams and start calling ourselves DevOps tomorrow and have things work well. We have to evolve things. And there are both patterns of teams that work really well in situations and patterns that don't work well. But in any of these cases, we could find that we pick a type of team that is transitional, that we use it for a certain period of time to get somewhere else. I'd say one of the things that's been amazing to me is across the 5 or 6 years or the last 5 or 6 years since Mr. Nadella has been in charge of Microsoft, is the way that that company has evolved their team structure. I felt, a long time ago when I used to go to Redmond and I was an MVP and meet the teams, they were very siloed and they were very much concerned about their own individual priorities, and the developers would push forward and they didn't have this operational Azure thing at the time. And over the last 5 or 6 years, they really evolved into much more of a team structure where they work together, and their engineers have responsibilities in Azure, and they've reduced or eliminated their QA, but they haven't really eliminated it. What they've done is they've moved that into a development team so that the priorities of the QA people or the people testing are aligned with the priorities of the people that are developing features. In some cases, they're the same people. In some cases, they're just on the same team, but they have to work together to make things happen. And they even have to run some of these things in Azure, so then they have operational responsibility as well. So I'd encourage you to look at this link and look at some of the patterns and anti-patterns of the team and understand them. I have one example here. This is the type 2, which is a fully shared ops area, where you have a very large team that does all development and testing and operations all inside the team, with maybe a few people that are only developers and a few people that are only ops. But really, most of your structure is a large team that has shared responsibility. Now, you'll note if you read through here and you discuss this, that it's more for an organization that has just one big product or one main item, kind of like a Facebook or a Netflix, which are the examples given here. So it's not suitable for everybody, but this is one of those teams that can help you be better in the future if that's the way you're aligned. If you have one big product, maybe you want to think about having everybody in development and ops working together as a team. As Kendra said, it doesn't mean that data professionals know C#. It doesn't mean that the C# developers know how to write windowing queries, but it does mean that they're aligned in trying to ensure that they work together to find the solutions to their particular problems. One of the things I've seen as we've looked to change culture in different organizations, and as I've seen here at Redgate, is that changing the culture and adapting to a new way of working doesn't mean that we stop getting things done. It's not a project that's you tackle it and you finish it. It's kind of an ongoing part of your work, and you're slowly changing. I would say at Redgate across the last 3 years, we've changed our culture dramatically in the way we approach things, and we've continued to build and release software along that time to give you new features and functions, even as our teams were changing. The Monitor team is a great investment, is a great example here, that they made an investment a few years ago and actually split into 2 teams that worked on 2-week sprints, but offset by a week. So one team would release every week, and it was just an alternating team. And when we made this change, it was difficult and cumbersome for it to happen, but what it meant was that we were trying to experiment with building a better set of teams for the future. And so we had decided to work with 2 different teams that had to coordinate their work. They worked in slightly separate areas of product, but they were constantly making these changes and pushing and pulling code from each other. But it was this investment across time that really allowed that group to do fantastic work in the last 2 or 3 years. And if you look through the release notes, you'd be amazed at how much they've accomplished. But it also made for a better software base in that time, because the teams had to learn to make sure they coordinated how they wrote code in various ways and how they communicated together. And the result is we have a better piece of software right now that's more adaptable for the future. We were lucky, our management believed in this and they let us move forward. But this is one of those areas that I think you want to take information like I've given you, Kendra's given you, other people have written on the internet, and try to show your management this is really an investment for the future. We're investing for the long term in trying to build better software and better teamwork along the way, so that at some point we're more efficient and we're working on those changes that matter, that add value to us. It does take time. It's not something that's overnight. We can't create a new vision and a new team structure, organizational structure, and have this take place right away. This is really the hard part of DevOps, and that we're going to take weeks or months, maybe even years, to slowly evolve our teams as people come and go, as they learn different jobs, as they change roles and responsibilities. They learn to collaborate and work together more and more. And more importantly, they learn to align their goals across the different teams, across the different areas of responsibility, and throughout the organization, so that we're all pushing in the same direction. We're still working on it here at Redgate. I know Microsoft's still working on it as well. And you will too. It's one of those things that I just slowly make changes over time to become better at what I do. Part of that is building this team. And so I've got a few practical items. IBM's done a bunch of work here, and for a company that's over 100 years old, they really have done some amazing things with culture in that time. And so I've linked here, they have what they call their cloud garage, and they have a number of practices that are practical items to help you build a team. And again, there's all these different items. I've got a few more on the next slide, but they're these items that you'll implement across time. And so as I try to change culture, as I try to build collaboration, I'm going to work on each one of these just across time and make slow changes. For example, one of the first ones here is that we want our teams to be able to work autonomously. We want them to be able to make some decisions in how they're going to perform their work, whether that's process or structure or where they sit or the hours they work, any of those things. We want to let them have some autonomy to do things, but at the same time, we have to hold them accountable and responsible for meeting their goals. And so it's a tricky balance to figure out how to do this. But this is one of those areas that management has to be involved, that they make sure people are held accountable for getting things done, but they understand that they don't want to micromanage. The same thing we go with improving the productivity of people and teams, is that management should be trying to improve productivity. The times that I've been a manager, my goal has been to stay out of the way of the people doing the work and not burden them with additional meetings or status reports or more administration. I want them focused on their tasks as long as possible or as much as possible each day. So my goal is to reduce impediments, to reduce meetings, to try to interrupt them as little as possible, and make it easy for them to get their work done. That's a very difficult thing to do, but it's one of those items that we have to train managers and management to understand, that additional status meetings and reports and more overhead is not helpful to us getting work done. We hire software developers, we hire DBAs to do work that's difficult and complex and creative. It's also very expensive in many cases. Let them focus on that work and not writing reports or other items. Same time, one of the ways that we increase collaboration between people and between teams is by having transparency of information. I've been to some of the conferences where people are doing very progressive DevOps, Kanban type flows in their organizations, and they really align their goals from top to bottom in a way that makes sense. So they have high level goals at the executive level, and those translate into smaller goals at different levels down to software features that need to be built. And that really is important because it allows people to understand what work is being done, what the priorities are, what order are we going to work things in, and then what's coming and what has been accomplished as well. So it really helps build a sense of pride as well as a sense of excitement as we're working through the list and we get things done. We certainly change these things, priorities may change, but having transparency helps ensure that everybody is aligned and that they know what's coming and what has been accomplished. Diversity is an interesting one as well. I know there's a lot of people that look at diversity as a bad word. It means that I haven't hired enough women or haven't had enough minority or something else. But while those things are very important and we certainly should look for a variety of people, it's diversity of thought that we're looking for. One of the reasons we push to hire women is they have a different perspective than men. We hire people that have different backgrounds, different educational experience, different experience in industry, because hiring the same person over and over leads to groupthink, or it leads to a tunnel vision on how to approach problems. Allowing for diversity there means that we consider alternative approaches and we evolve and become better across time. That can be a very fine line between allowing debate and discussion about a topic and having somebody feel like they're being shut down or bullied. And it takes practice to find ways to encourage debate between team members without somebody's passion becoming almost a bullying technique. But when you do that, you can actually get some creative solutions and you think outside the box, and we allow ourselves to move forward as we build our software. We take the experience of everybody to form some synergy to build better software in the future. Now, one thing that you have to watch out for here, though, is as I'm encouraging debate about different solutions and alternative approaches, I have to have a place where I make a decision and actually get work done. And so it becomes important that you time box things. Just like I want teams to have some flexibility to work in their manner, they have to actually be accountable and responsible. In the same way, the debate has to end at some point in time, and we have to actually move forward so that we get things done. A few of the other items here. We're all going to make mistakes. Our teams are going to make mistakes. Software is going to fail. We're going to introduce bugs. We're going to have problems. We're always going to have a need to understand why we had problems, which is where RCA, or root cause analysis, comes into play. I think root cause analysis is very important, but it's also very difficult to do in a team without blaming somebody or without shunning somebody. And so learning blameless techniques, I think, is very important for a team. And it's one of those things as an organization, you should perform root cause analysis, whether it's a bug that we introduced, whether it's a downtime from a failed machine, or whether it's just a poor coding practice that we've noticed in a code review or QA or something else. What we want to do is come to a root cause analysis and try to avoid that in the future as an organization, not because we want to blame somebody or try to say that this person failed. We want to know as a team, our goal is to get better. This is something I do right now outside of technology. I coach a volleyball team, and I coach 13-year-old girls. And so I always cheer them on, and I am very happy when they get something right, when they accomplish something. But when we have something go wrong or they make mistakes, which is expected, try hard to let them know that we're not upset, I'm not angry, it's nothing wrong with that. This just gives us something to work on next week, right? This is a way for us to improve. So when we find these mistakes, we find these problems, it gives us something to focus on that we want to be better at. And that should be the goal here. And the last two items I think are very important as well, that we want to enjoy our working environment. And so we want to cheer each other on and give praise. While bonuses and corporate recognition, things are nice, it's better to have our peers actually appreciate what we do and tell us we did a good job. And I think I've certainly been guilty of this in the past. I don't often tell people enough when they've done a great job. But that's something that helps build a team when you realize that others appreciate what you've done. Certainly my wife reminds me of this with our kids, that we always want to make sure we let them know that when they've done something right, and let them know when they've done something wrong, but we still want them to know we're supportive of them. And so recognizing others and appreciating what they've done is important. The other thing here that I think it took me a long time to understand is that we all have different skill levels. There are experts, there are beginners, there's people in the middle. And so something that might be trivial for an expert might be hard for a beginner, and we want to appreciate that our beginners have learned to do that, or they're getting better at that. So learning to recognize that we have this growth and improvement, I think, helps build a team closer together. And then lastly, while sometimes you may think they're silly or unnecessary, team building exercises, team bonding sessions, social times like happy hours or occasional parties, they're very important. Here at Redgate, when we accomplish something big, we release product, there's often a big champagne toast. We do some of those things as a company. And we have a certain amount of funding and time allocated to allow our teams to do some team building as well. And it's not every month, but periodically we want people to get together because it helps build teams closer together. And even if it's something that you wouldn't necessarily do on your own, participating in that with a group sometimes helps grow you closer together. And it helps you appreciate that our differences are also our strengths, and it helps us grow. So learning to build a team, I think, is one of those important things that really helps you move forward into building a better organization. Whether you build software or not, it's certainly good, but it definitely helps in trying to implement DevOps and become better at building things. So now let's look even more about how we can make some of these changes, really with technology, because a lot of DevOps is using the power of computing to improve our processes, to make things better. There's all different ways that we can do this, and at Redgate we spent the last 5 or 6 years really researching, talking to customers, both because we want to build better tools to solve their challenges, but we also want to understand what works and doesn't work, because we're a DevOps company ourselves. We do a lot of this stuff internally as we build our software. So we're trying to solve our problems as well as those of our customers. And so one of the things we've realized is that this is really a circle. We used to present this as a flow where we went from development to production and kind of work through, but we realized it's more of a circle, that there's constant feedback loops, and we're constantly learning and changing our process to improve it, which is really what DevOps asks us to do, that we want to have feedback between groups, and we want to do experiments and learning so that we're constantly cycling to improve the way things happen. So if we start over here on the left, we have the development side where the developers work together. And a lot of what we've learned is that we want to standardize how some of our groups work together. So that's tooling and it's version control and other things. So standards could be many things. Could be naming standards, style standards, design patterns. But having those standards in place really helps us ensure that the bar of what people have to learn is lower, that they know when they pick up code, they know how it works or how it's structured, how it should be structured. And so having those in place is important. I'm a big fan of naming standards. I'm a big fan of style standards. Don't really care what they are, but they should be consistent in our groups. And so a lot of our tools are designed to help you do these things. Like SQL Prompt, we have all different sorts of formatting styles so that if developers need to work disparately, they can reformat things for them, and they can quickly change and reformat to a standard style so that anybody picking up the code can look at it and it makes sense. Certainly, there's plenty of other tools in the C# world and Python and Java that do the same thing, and we've been bringing them to SQL because they realize they're important in the database world as well. Static code analysis is really designed to catch problems in code as early as possible, or potential design issues, code smells, bad practices. And so while I think this is very immature in the SQL space, Redgate has been trying hard to add features and make this more useful to our customers. So I'll show an example of that in a minute, but all these things are designed to spread knowledge and have us working as a team and not as a series of individuals that work differently. We want a common language and structure for how we build software because it smooths the entire process. Now, it doesn't mean that we want to specify exactly that we do this or that we only use C# or we only use Visual Studio with ReSharper or something like that, but we certainly want to limit the choice of tools, languages, frameworks, etc. We've actually gone through this at Redgate where we had a number of frameworks and things grow up, and we realized we needed to kind of shrink this down, that we can't have one team use Node and one use React and one use Angular and one use something else. We want to limit our choice so that as people switch teams or we change architecture of products, it makes more sense. We do have a process to add new technologies or tools or language or something, but we want to be sure that we don't just let every developer do something different because they feel like it. As an example, I've got SQL Prompt here. It shows some of the things we've done with static code analysis where we try to highlight some of the potential issues that are out there so you can turn these on and off for your projects or your teams or which ones apply to you. And then we've started to add some of the items over here on the far left. You'll see that there's a little pop-up that shows you how to fix some of the items in your code. So if you have team members that are less experienced, they get some idea of how to correct some of these code smells. And you have people that are more experienced that might write tests or might set some of these standards as items that we want to follow as we're building our software. As I said, this is still kind of rudimentary. We're refining it all the time. We're adding more flexibility and features to what our static code analysis does. We'd certainly like to hear from you if there are things you want to see, but we're definitely trying to make this better so that everybody can build software. The other thing I'd say is that version control is a critical part of building a team, that we need to have this known shared code base of things that we use. I've worked in too many teams where people had code all over the place, not version, that they name things under bar 2, under bar 3, etc. And trying to understand what our version of code and trying to understand which version we should work with is very difficult. Now, using version control is one of those choices you make and how you're going to build software. I think there's two primary ways of developing with trunk-based development or feature branch development. They both have positives, negatives. I wouldn't recommend one over the other. I think it depends on the maturity of your software, the maturity of your team, the skill levels that are involved, and you can pick and choose. I'd certainly advise you to experiment with both and decide which one works better for you. The one thing I would do say is if you're going to do branch development, please merge early and often because the longer you wait before you merge, the more difficult it becomes to get your software to work. Now, Redgate, we've got SQL change automation and SQL source control that allow you to get that database code into version control, something which has not been very easy from the tooling that we've had in SQL Server. But these allow us to ensure that we are consistently putting code in the same format in the same way in and out of version control so that other developers can understand what's going on. Now, when we leave the development area, one of the things we have to do is get that software to production. So that's where some of the automation comes into play. And these are kind of the areas where DevOps is, I think there's a lot of focus from certainly different vendors, but also from the practitioners. They talk about the continuous stuff. So continuous integration, delivery, and deployment. Continuous integration is something that software developers have really spent the last decade or so building up a process set of tools. And the idea here is to get feedback to the development team quickly. Does stuff work or not work? Does it integrate with everybody else? Is our team environment meshing together? And at Redgate, we've helped do that for the database, and it's important that you get this in place because the sooner you find potential issues, the sooner you can fix them, and the faster or the cheaper it is to actually fix these issues. Continuous delivery means that we want to have a repeatable, reliable process that we understand to get that software to other machines. So we understand how to get it out of development and get it into operation somewhere. We have still gates, we still have human review here, but we know that the process is happen in the same way because the machine is doing it every time. And then continuous deployment is something I haven't seen very often, but it's a mature level where we are starting to trust our development teams to actually release the software to production. They decide when it's done, they're probably still responsible for it or accountable for it, but they're actually releasing it out there. And at Redgate, we've built these SQL change automation commandlets that allow you to build and test and release software and move it between different environments. And I'm showing the plugins here in Azure DevOps, but we certainly have it for other platforms as well. And they're written in PowerShell so that they really will work in any type of system, including a bespoke system that you might implement yourself. And then once we get it to production, we want to optimize it, we want to monitor it, we want to understand what's happening inside of our environment. And so monitoring is really about a couple of things. One is I want to understand what the baseline performance is right now. How is my system operating? Whether that's from a feature usage perspective, maybe it's from a resource perspective where I understand what's being used, not used. And then I want to know how things change over time as I alter the system, whether that's infrastructure or code. I want to know what's happening. And the idea here is that I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to use this to try to drive how I build and release software in the future. An operations part of DevOps really should be looking at reports and metrics and instrumentation that tells me what features are being used or not used, or how often are used. What is this doing to my resource consumption? Am I using more resources, more CPU, more memory, more disk? Is it affecting how the software actually works? And then how does that change as we deploy new types of software changes? Because that tells us whether we have patterns or anti-patterns that we should be following in how we deploy software and how we build software. Maybe we learn there's a certain way to build features, there's a certain way to write queries is better than another way in our environment. We need analysis from our monitoring system to let us know. And development should certainly then be looking at this information. They should be meeting with ops to understand the impact of changes, what does the monitoring system actually show us and what do the reports do. And they should use this to drive better software development practices or better patterns. Now, SQL Monitor, we've done a lot of work. I think that's been the best team in Redgate in the last few years. And they've integrated so many different things. And at monitor.redgate.com is our live demo system where we're monitoring actually the SQL Server Central live servers as well as some other ones in our system. You can go look at how they're actually performing. And on the screen here, I show you there's one of those items that we added to SQL Monitor I think is amazing. So there's, at the bottom on the timeline, there's actually a deployment's taken place from a SQL change automation commandlets. And it's noted on the metric graph along with CPU and other items that are available so that if there's a change there, I can see what happened in that timeline. So there's various other items that are annotated on the graphs, but having this integration between where development comes into operations and the impact is certainly very important. Monitoring and learning, as I said, are really about providing feedback. And I try to answer these two questions when I'm building software is that, is the feature I'm building actually being used? And then does it perform well from a resource standpoint? Because those impact how then I may move in the future. One of the things about DevOps is it helps me learn what works well, what doesn't work well. Maybe more importantly, what are my customers actually using? There's certainly been cases where we built a feature, we built a function that nobody uses or very few people use. And DevOps allows us to quickly shift focus to spend more time or less time in areas if we find out they're using. But we need monitoring on our systems to understand if they're being used and how they're being used. And then the last part of our compliant database DevOps story is kind of the feedback loop to development where we do provisioning and protection of our data. Now this certainly includes backup, but it includes refreshing and building those environments out that are going to be used throughout our process. Our test and development environments are the basis for our manufacturing, the basis for our building software, and we periodically have to refresh them. We certainly have to duplicate them as we build or as we hire new software developers or when machines fail. And so this is an area that allows us to test that we're actually doing things well by building those environments out in a consistent manner. So we want to do that in ways that allow our developers to work, but we also protect our data because data protection is becoming a bigger and bigger part of our jobs all the time. There's more legislation. Right now I'm in the UK and we're bound by GDPR at least for another 11 days. Right? Is that what it is? 11, Tom says 11 days, so might be a little bit longer, but we'll see. In any case, we want to protect that sensitive data, and so obfuscating it, anonymizing it, pseudonymizing it, I can't say that word, but protecting data in non-production environments is very important. And then we want to practice this over and over by building refreshes, building new environments on demand. And we have SQL Provision, which is one of those tools that I think is amazing, and it really changes the way you do database development. Now I've got one of our engineers, Chris Unwin, actually built this little demo for me that shows what he's doing here is building a masking set. He's saving it off. Then he's going to use it with our SQL Provision product, where SQL Clone is going to create a database very quickly using this mask, the mask as a way to obfuscate or protect that sensitive data. So I think that's one of those fantastic things that ensures that my developers have a consistent development environment, that my test data looks like Grant's test data and it looks like Kendra's test data. And it's also protected so that we're not allowing sensitive information to get onto our laptops or to get into other environments where it could potentially cause us a data breach and a large fine. If you haven't looked at SQL Provision, you should. It's a fantastic product, and certainly if you're in a regulated industry or you're in an area where you're getting affected by the legislation, like California, you should check this out, as I think it's absolutely amazing. Really, at the end of the day, the culture is the hardest part of evolving the DevOps process. The technology is super easy. You know, I think Tom will probably show you in a bit how to do this in an hour or less, which is amazing. No? Not today, but he's got demos out there. If you look at SQL in the City Stream from December, we certainly did it. But the technology is easy, and any of us could go out there in a few days and implement that in your system. But the cultural change is really hard to get people to adjust their habits and adjust the way they work, and maybe more importantly, trust the process. And so you have to evolve this over time. And you want to evolve it so that we're all in alignment and that we're working as a team to get things done together. Certainly we want to use similar tools and techniques and process, but more importantly, we want to just get better every day. And we do that by learning, by getting feedback, and by improving and changing what we do. A lot of this is up to management, and so I always encourage you to talk to your management and advocate for change. I do that here all the time. I think there's plenty of groups that are tired of me advocating for change, but I want them to be better and I want them to improve, and so I keep slowly pushing. And I understand that we can't change today or tomorrow, and it might take us weeks, but trying to get management to incentivize us to work as a team or to align our goals as a team makes it much easier and much more enjoyable to work in a certain environment. Take baby steps is my best advice, to just go through this a little bit at a time. And with that, here's my contact information if you want to get a hold of me. And then if there are any questions we've got, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I think we're going to turn over to Tom. Tom, what are you talking about today?
We have a special guest today.
We do.
We do indeed, so it's going to be a surprise.
Oh, it's a surprise. So we have Arne here. He's a sales engineer from Pasadena. He's getting away from his kids because his kids are wonderful, but they're little. So as somebody that's had 3 kids, I understand what it's like to be a new dad and deal with little kids. So Arne's getting a vacation, but he's got something special planned, I think, today, and you're going to enjoy it. So with that, I will leave it with you, and we'll be back in a few minutes, and hopefully you tune in and enjoy the rest of SQL in the City Stream.